Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie's story just captivated us.
It had so many classic elements of American storytelling. The westward bound adventure, influencer culture.
On social media, you see a picture of this perfect relationship, full of fun and life and energy. Actually, what was going on behind the scenes was something quite different.
So, what happened here and here?
Like, grabs my face.
At what point did it go wrong? Was it always wrong and the online picture was just a lie?
Still no sign of 22-year-old Gabby Petito. Brian had shown back up at his parents' house in her van, but where was Gabby?
I'm asking for help from the parents of Brian.
Who leaves with the love of his life and returns without her and doesn't say a word? Who does that?
Well, what are you thinking? Helping your son?
The Laundries, they had to know something.
The Petitos are involved in a legal battle against Brian Laundrie's parents, a lawsuit making some really explosive allegations about who knew what and when. Brian Laundrie called his parents and said that Gabby was gone.
And they keep this quiet for weeks and weeks.
You had a Romeo and Juliet doomsday scenario. And I think that that's what made it so riveting for so many people.
Hello, hello. Working with steel surface for no one. 10 is just coming in on me. Make it so bad.
Sorry, I'm like wandering around. I'm just anxious, so I'm just like, let me walk around.
How do you feel?
As I said, anxious. Gabby is definitely my best friend. She was one of those people that you lose words for it because you're just like, I've never met anyone like you. Anyone that I introduced her to, she would leave and they're like, I love her. Where did she come from?
I spent a year covering the Gabby Petito story for Vanity Fair. And basically forensically reconstructed her life just by following her social media pages. Gabby Petito grew up in Blue Point, Long Island. It's a really small town with a population of less than 5,000 people. Gabby had a very loving home life, but her parents had her when they were quite young, and they ended up going their separate ways and starting new families. And so Gabby grew up a bit of a nomad, going back and forth between her parents' homes.
Gabby is the eldest of many siblings and definitely played that role. She was close to all four of her parents. They were all considered her moms and her dads.
People who knew Gabby Petito growing up described her as being beautiful inside and out. Gabby loved butterflies. She loved the color aqua blue. She loved the Beatles song Let It Be.
Gabby always loved art. She was always like doodling, and she loved nature. She loved taking photos.
Gabby Petito was just this bright, beautiful young woman. But she was a bit of an outsider, sort of marched to her own beat.
Growing up, Gabby seemed to have friends, but she didn't really feel like she fit in completely and spent a lot of time online.
Gabby used the internet as a resume, a diary, a mirror. And the more online she went, the less unusual she felt. Brian and Gabby started talking when Brian was a junior in high school and Gabby was a sophomore. Brian Laundrie left a huge amount of information about himself online. And based on his drawings, he was very obsessed with copying comic book characters, and he would post those online. So Brian is sort of like the artistic buddy that Gabby's never had.
Brian Laundrie was really a mystery. There were not a lot of people that we were able to find who really knew him. Anyone who we could identify, they wouldn't speak with us.
Brian graduated in 2016 and stuck around Blue Point and got a job. Gabby graduated high school in 2017, a year after Brian, and they stayed friends for years, just friends. And by July of 2019, she and Brian are an item. They bond over this desire to see nature, to see national parks, to see places that look nothing like where they grew up. And that drove them together in a sort of intense way. At the time, van life is trending online. It's part of this emerging ethos of like living with less and eco-dwellings.
Welcome, guys, to another episode. And we've been on the road traveling in a ton of different vans.
You buy a van, you turn it into almost like a little apartment inside, and you go explore.
2020, we had the chance to create what we think is the ultimate van layout.
During COVID, it got very popular with young people.
Gabby purchased the van and converted it because she was the one who wanted to live out this van life, and it was a dream of hers. And by sharing their van life journey, they could make money someday through their blog and through sharing the videos.
Gabby's goal was to become like a travel blogger, to become successful in terms of posting videos and pictures of this van life culture.
If we looked back through Gabby and Brian's social media, the picture that emerged was one that was perfect. They seemed to be madly in love.
Brian's stretching, doing some morning yoga.
Their journey looked so innocent, you couldn't look away.
Online, it was a fairy tale life. They were kissing in front of road signs. They were perched on cliffs. But behind closed doors in their van, things were unraveling.
Gabby had been talking to her family throughout the trip, and all of a sudden, they weren't hearing from her anymore.
The last time that Gabby's parents had any contact with her was August 25th.
On September 1st, 2021, Brian arrives home to Florida, where his parents are living.
Brian Laundrie had shown up at his parents' house in her van, but where was Gabby?
The last time that Gabby's parents had any contact with their daughter was August 25th. Gabby's parents ultimately report her missing on September 11th.
I found out Gabby was missing through the news, and it took me a minute to comprehend it. I don't even know how to describe how I felt. I immediately went to social media and was like, all right, let me do what I can. Let's get her name out there. Let's get her face out there. People that didn't even know her were like, we have to find her. We have to do this. It was very powerful.
A young girl doesn't look older than 23.
Pause this, screenshot it, share this.
It was starting to bubble up on social media that there was this missing young woman, Gabby Petito. So we drove to Northport, Florida, to the Laundrie's house. I thought we would be there just a couple of days. We ended up staying about 6 weeks.
Gabby Petito hasn't been heard from since the last week of August.
Brian Laundrie showed up at his home in Florida on September 1st.
5 days later, the police hold a press conference with Joe Petito.
At this time, I'm going to allow Joe, Gabby's dad, to come up and say a few words.
All right, what I need from everybody here is help, because the goal is still not met, and that goal is to bring Gabby home safe.
Joe Petito tried to maintain a very, very brave face, but It came through, his desperation and the trauma that he and the rest of his family members were going through.
As a mom, I had concerns for my daughter going on a road trip in general, but I felt safe. They were together. They had a plan.
Justice needs to be served.
We basically camped out outside the Laundrie's house. It turned into this circus that I really didn't expect.
Suffolk County put out a nationwide alert for Gabby. At that moment in the investigation, the goal is to find Gabby alive. One of the first steps of the investigation focused on collecting as much data as we could to try to track exactly where the last location Brian and Gabby were. Cell towers, put them in the Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. The initial general area was almost 20,000 square miles. A thorough analysis led us to the Spread Creek dispersion area, which was the last known location of cellular telephone activity of Gabby Petito. At that point, we set up an on-site command post and started planning for a physical grid search by our search and rescue team.
As a reporter, the first thing I did was go and knock on the door to see if the Laundries wanted to talk. That's when we realized they weren't going to talk. It's important to point out that the boyfriend right now is not a suspect. Police say he's not a person of interest, but they want to talk to him, and they say he will not talk to detectives, and his parents, who are in the house behind me, are also not talking to detectives right now. As far as we knew, Brian Laundrie was inside the house, but he refused to say a word about Gabby, which didn't make a lot of sense. Where is the boyfriend? We're outside the boyfriend's parents right now, just outside Tampa. Take a look. So we basically made this agreement with the neighbors just to the right of the Laundries that we could camp out on their lawn. Mr. Laundrie, do you know anything about what happened to Gabby Petito? Why aren't you talking?
This case just seemed right from the get-go to be filled with mystery, with intrigue, and then with a massive dose of frustration. Where was she? And why was Brian Laundrie being so silent? Who leaves with the love of his life and returns without her and doesn't say a word? Who does that?
Police say the ongoing silence from Brian Laundrie's family is making an already complex case even more challenging.
I saw all over the news that Gabby was missing, and I felt an instant connection to her. Brian wasn't talking and the parents weren't talking. So straight away, you've got this very suspicious set of circumstances. And why would they not tell the Petitos key information about their daughter?
Why are we so obsessed with missing young, beautiful women in this country? Why does it get so much more media attention and public attention? I think it preys on our worst fears, the loss of innocence and the loss of purity.
Where's Gabby, Brian? Where's Gabby? Where is Gabby, Brian? We're out here!
People started coming from all over the country to scream and yell and protest about the Laundries' behavior, about their silence.
Stop hiding inside your house, Brian! Come out! Gabby's family want answers!
Social media played a huge role. People were weighing in, people were watching video clearly for clues.
We have a lot to unpack in this Gabby Petito case.
She has since gone missing while he returned home. On August 25th, she also posted an Instagram post, but it was not like her. This is an update in the Gabby Petito case. What really resonated with me about Gabby Petito and her story was that I could see a lot of myself in her. We were a similar age. I was also a YouTuber at the time. The hashtag Find Gabby Petito got millions of views as people were sharing updates. We don't know where she is, but we need to spread this information and help find Gabby.
Gabby Petito has gone missing in Grand Teton National Park.
So this is incredibly suspicious.
The last time that her mom spoke to her on the phone, people were wanting to know more, so I just kept searching for updates and sharing about them. The FBI Denver Twitter account posted this.
One of the key investigative steps this day and age is to scrub somebody's social media to learn more about them. We did that with both Brian and Gabby in this case. I didn't see anything that would lead us to think anything nefarious had gone on at that point in time.
So on social media, you see a picture of this perfect relationship. They're traveling across America and full of fun and life and energy. But actually what was going on behind the scenes was something quite different.
You can't keep chocolate in Utah. Not in July.
Was the online picture just a lie, or did something happen on this road trip? At what point did it go wrong? Was it always wrong? To truly understand why, we have to go back to the beginning.
Not everyone is aware that Gabby and Brian actually went on their first road trip back in 2019. They quit their jobs, they went on a cross-country road trip. It was in Gabby's Nissan Sentra. And in their social media, we can see the beginnings of a toxic relationship.
I'm looking at the post that Gabby made about Dallas, Texas. The caption says, "Hello, I'm having a great time." What's interesting to me about this photo is it doesn't yet include Brian. On October 17th, Gabby posts a new photo from Colorado Springs. And again, just her. Brian is not pictured in these either. Gabby is a person who naturally understands what sells. No one wants to see a pretty influencer in a relationship. It fits with this brand of a nomadic lifestyle, you know, not being tied down.
I think the first trip that they take together, that clearly is a dream trip for Gabby. But the omission of him is interesting. Did that cause tension? Was he upset about that?
Late October, Gabby and Brian make it to California. While Gabby is getting her fortune told at the Santa Monica Pier, Brian is making a post that says, "LA sucks." And why does he actually feel that way? Is it because Gabby's not posting pictures of him? In this first road trip, we're starting to see elements of the relationship that will become a problem later on. Namely, Brian's jealousy and Gabby's independence.
Now to the disappearance of Gabby Petito. The missing Long Island woman is making headlines coast to coast tonight as the case literally stretches across the country. Investigators are now calling the boyfriend a person of interest.
When Brian Laundrie was named the person of interest, the Northport Police Department had primary jurisdiction over the case and were handling the surveillance of Brian Laundrie.
They'd started watching that residence to see if they could find Brian to talk to him. He was seen at one point, but he was never questioned.
Did you guys look through Brian Laundrie's Instagram? It's very, you know what, let me show you.
Totally think he did something.
Own up to what you did. And don't act like you're innocent, because innocent people don't run and hide.
Almost immediately, the case becomes a social media sensation, and Brian starts being on the receiving end of that attention. People are going to his social media pages, leaving mean comments, harassing him in all these ways.
Brian, if you're listening to me right now, let me tell you something. You may have done the wrong thing then. Do the right thing now.
In mid-September, several days after Gabby Petito was reported missing, Brian Laundrie's parents issued a statement through their attorney expressing hope that the search for Miss Petito would be successful and that she would be reunited with her family. But Brian Laundrie's parents weren't talking to the media or police at that point, and Brian Laundrie was staying totally silent.
It seemed really perplexing to everyone that Brian wasn't hauled down to the station and made to answer tough questions. Clearly, the happiness that they conveyed on social media, that wasn't necessarily the full picture.
Based on what Gabby's friends later told the media, the romantic relationship between Gabby and Brian is really tumultuous from the very beginning. Friends described it as toxic, but toxic or not. Shortly after Gabby and Brian returned from their first road trip in 2019, Brian convinces Gabby to move with him to Florida.
For Gabby, she's leaving behind her friends and her family and that support network. But for Brian, it means that he gets her to himself.
After Gabby moves with Brian to Florida, she goes on to a site called Bumble BFF, where people can go on and find friends. And it's on this site that Gabby finds Rose Davis.
I just didn't have friends at the time, and so we matched. And we started hanging out like every other day or every week. It was just like, I don't need any other friends. We're good. We would go do TikTok dances and be weird out in public. Like, we just never cared.
Gabby starts sleeping over at Rose's house a lot. Whenever there's an issue with Brian, she'll go over there.
It's okay. It's fine.
I have the video of her breaking into my room because she locked us out. She fell in the bush a little bit, but we managed to get in. It was great. She got dirt all over my bed. It was fantastic.
Brian is already a jealous guy. So the fact that she has this close friend and they're sleeping in the same bed on nights when Gabby and Brian fight, it drives him bananas, drives him crazy. He insists on picking her up from Rose's place instead of letting Rose drive her home. He is very, very territorial and competitive with Rose.
One night, Rose and Gabby, they were going to go out together, and Brian was very upset about this.
He resorts to taking her ID so that she cannot go out with Rose. He shoves her, and she slaps him. And then she flees to Rose's house and tells Rose that Brian's episodes get physical.
These aren't episodes. This is somebody who's trying to control Gabby. They're only going to get worse.
After living in Florida together for a little while, COVID's in full swing, probably a bit stir-crazy. Gabby and Brian come together over the idea of a house on wheels.
Van life is all about couples, too. It's an idea that allows Brian to enter the framework of Gabby's online presence. Gabby buys the van. The van is registered in Gabby's name. But this blowout with Gabby and sleeping in Rose's bed, it pushes Brian to the brink where he's like, we need to leave. I need to get her out of here. So he jumpstarts the road trip early.
The van life kind of, like, she wanted to do that and she talked about it, but it kind of came out of nowhere. When she was like, I'm doing this, I was like, what's going on? Between you and I, no, I didn't want her to leave.
Brian and Gabby take off in this tiny, cramped van. What they thought was going to be a world-opening, romance-enhancing trip was actually just like a pressure cooker. Gabby's first post during the van life road trip is tagged in Monument Rocks. It, to me, speaks to how new this was to her, this sort of influencer thing, but she was getting the hang of that, how to represent herself in a way that was engaging.
She was a talented editor, so she was able to edit things to make it look like, you know, that perfect life that everybody hopes that they can have and likes to portray on social media.
July 8th, 2021, Gabby posts from Colorado Springs. Gabby's having fun. She's climbing mountains, having a great time. Brian is not in any of these pictures yet. That's worth noting. About a month into the road trip, life on the road starts to get very complicated for Gabby and Brian. I'm going through Brian's Instagram posts. So this is in Utah. This is classic Brian Laundrie. He posts, "Zion is proof that mankind can ruin anything, even in an effort to preserve it. Beautiful park, just with an unfortunate infestation of human beings." Brian was definitely very misanthropic, hated people, a loner, liked being alone, whereas Gabby was extroverted, a people person, and easygoing. Nobody had a real understanding of what was going on with Gabby and Brian behind closed doors because they did such a good job of making that a secret. On August 12th, about 6 weeks into their road trip, Gabby and Brian go to a coffee shop in Moab around 9 a.m. so that Gabby can work on their van life website. He, for some reason, is infuriated by her trying to do this work. Thanks to the internet, she's connected to the whole world, and he can't stand it. And so he tries to punish her, taking away her phone, taking away her lens into the world.
It's this chip. It's the taking of a confident young woman and psychologically undoing her.
Grant County Sheriff's Office. I'd like to report a domestic dispute. We drove by and the gentleman was slapping the girl. He was slapping her? Yes, and then he proceeded to hit her, hopped in the car, and they drove off.
In my experience, perpetrators never de-escalate.
They just drove off. Okay, you said it's a white van? It was white, Florida license plate.
It was August 12th when a 911 call came in Moab, Utah. There was a witness who saw a young man striking a woman. We later find out that that was Brian Laundrie striking Gabby.
What I think happened on that sidewalk is there was a slap. Gabby retaliated, tried to grab her phone. Once she had her phone, she tried to use it to hit Brian. And then he locks the car, so she can't get into the passenger door. And she manages to force her way in before he can drive away without her. So next thing that Gabby knows, she's speeding out of Moab, Utah, in the passenger seat of her van. Brian is rage driving.
Driver is currently doing 45 miles an hour. Zone through here is 25. Oh! Subject says to hit the curb.
When they pulled Brian and Gabby over, it's all on multiple body camera videos.
What's your guys' names?
Gabby.
I'm Brian. Gabby, Brian? Okay. What's going on? How come you're crying?
I'm sorry, we've just been fighting this morning. Some personal issues.
It's a long day. We were camping yesterday, and camping got supplies and stuff
I'm sorry I hit the bump there.
I was distracting him from driving. I'm sorry.
Can I get you to step out of the vehicle for me, ma'am?
Yeah.
I'm gonna go ahead and close your door. Okay. I'm just going over here.
Gabby's very upset. It should be clear that she is the victim right from the start.
You want to tell me what's going on?
I was apologizing to him and saying, I'm sorry that I'm so mean, because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I get really frustrated. I'm in a bad mood. I've just been really stressed. I had so much work I was doing on my computer this morning.
Gabby Petito started blaming herself for the violence, started making excuses for why she was hurt and that it was her fault because she was OCD.
I wonder how many times Brian has said that she's mean, that she's the problem. That's what I often hear from victims. The narrative that then becomes dominant is his, and she's trying to protect him.
I've been building my website, so I've just been really stressed, and I don't really believe that I could do any of it. So many have gone down. But I'm perfectly calm. I'm calm all the time, and it really stresses me out, and it's a rough morning.
Why don't we do this? Why don't I sit you down in the back seat of my car? You're not in any trouble, okay? I'm not going to be putting handcuffs on you.
Now we see a parks officer turn up. Brian's now center of attention.
Come on over here. You're not in any trouble, right? So, tell me what's going on.
Well, what happened this morning is that she's trying to start up like her own little website blog and everything, so like every time you
want to tell me about those scratches on your face?
She had her cell phone in her hands, so I was trying to push her away. So let's take a minute, step back, breathe, and she got me her phone.
What's the disagreement about?
It was, I wouldn't even call it disagreement. Our little squabble started because you're hanging out at the coffee shop, and when we got back to the van, there some stuff there.
So when you look at Gabby, it's clear she's really upset, and he's just saying it's a little disagreement, it's a little squabble. Well, it wasn't.
I didn't get overtly physical. I'm just trying to keep her away and not get hit. I feel bad. I think it's so public.
Okay, so you said you pushed her to create some distance, obviously, right? What happened after that? What got the scratches on your eye?
I suppose fingernails, but I'm not complaining. Not complaining about
Is it bruised or tender or anything like that?
Okay. I'm fine.
Cops pretty quickly come to the determination that Brian Laundrie is actually the victim in the situation, which, you know, when you watch all the video looking back, it's pretty clear that that's not the case.
Hey, how are you? My name's Eric. I'm with Moab Police. What's your name?
Gabby.
Gabby, how old are you?
I'm 22.
What happened? What's going on?
He told me to just relax for a second, and I didn't want to relax, so I got getting mad. I mean, I don't need to be mad.
Is there something on your cheek here?
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Can I see the other side of your face? So, what happened here and here?
I'm not sure. It was
There's two people saying that they saw him punch you. We're just independent witnesses by Moonflower.
To be honest, I doesn't make him first.
Gabby tells the officers that she hit him first. And they run with that.
Where'd you hit him?
I slapped him.
You slapped him first? And then just on his face?
He just told me to shut up.
How many times did you slap him?
Just a couple.
Where did he hit you? Don't worry, just be honest.
Like, that's my face. Like this.
The fact that Gabby acts it out, the hand over the face, the nose and the mouth is important. This picture was taken by Gabby. On her phone, she looks distressed. When women take pictures like this, it's for evidence, in case something terrible happens.
It became crystal clear that just 5 weeks into this cross-country journey, the Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie love story wasn't what we thought it was. All of a sudden, this fairy tale couple that was sort of enjoying this wonderful, whimsical cross-country trip Now we saw how broken she was and how manipulative he was.
He just grabbed you? Did he hit you though? I mean, it's okay if you're saying you hit him, and then I understand if he hit you, but we want to know the truth if he actually hit you.
I guess, yeah, but I hit him first.
When I saw the video of Gabby crying to these police officers and blaming herself, my heart was broken because in my line of work, this is classic domestic violence. The woman blamed herself.
I was yelling at him, and then when he turned there like that, I got up on his arm, there's no.
Meanwhile, Brian is nervous, and he's looking at her, and he's looking away. He thinks he's about to get caught, and he wants to know what she's been telling them. And lucky for him, they're not asking her the right questions, and they're only interested in what he has to say. I mean, it goes in an insane direction.
Don't take any medication or anything like that.
Taking medication?
Yeah, do you know if she takes anything?
Crazy. No, none that I know of.
The minute Officer Robbins says, you seem manic, what Brian does is then deflect onto Gabby and says, she's crazy. He then starts to put Gabby under the microscope. He falls into Brian's manipulations.
I know her off the stuff to me. That couple of years. Believe me, if I were to say that me and my wife haven't had our share of spouts, I'd be lying to you.
You can tell that, they're not viewing Brian as the attacker in the situation. One of the officers is sort of like joking around with Brian. There was this weird little bro thing happening.
All the male officers all almost want to high-five him and fist bump him at that point. Women are crazy, we get it, bro. And this whole narrative now starts to become much more sinister.
Unless the guy's screaming that he needs to go to jail and did something to this girl, it sounds to me like she's the primary aggressor. So at this point, you're the victim of a domestic assault, even if you...
He laughs. He is baffled, and he can't quite believe how this has turned out. And neither can I.
One of the things that stuck out in that body cam footage was he was laughing about the entire incident. The demeanor Brian showed on video was concerning, and that's just not something that we see during a domestic incident.
Do you guys have enough money for like a hotel room or anything like that?
My blood boils just seeing how this is conveyed. You couldn't get this more wrong.
I'm gonna get y'all lined up. Don't feel like you are making anybody do anything outside of that.
Brian could charm people and manipulate people. I mean, we just saw on camera him do it to 2 uniformed officers and 2 park rangers.
And I know how rough this stuff can be. Like I said, definitely 5 years. Believe me, her anxiety elevates my anxiety. And sometimes it
that's why I'm like, I gotta walk away, I gotta breathe. I'm gonna backfire even more.
I mean, this is just maddening to me. He is so pleased that he's pulled this off, and he's got his backpack on, and now he's being given a lift to the hotel. And Gabby, well, she doesn't really matter.
I am not going to cite you for domestic violence battery. You're going to be taking the van tonight, and you're going to go somewhere else. I am going to get him lined up for the hotel for you tonight. Ready for a ride? Yes, I'm going to be So he's going to get you all set up with your hotel room, and he's going to take care of it from here.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for everything.
No problem. It's nice meeting you, Brian.
Nice to meet you.
Have a good one.
This just enables him and it green lights him, and it's just a travesty that this happened.
Social media just exploded when the body cam video of the Moab incident broke. people right away realized that Gabby looked to be a distressed victim of domestic violence.
This was real, raw footage, not curated by somebody posted on social media. It was what was actually going on with her, and seeing her crying and hurt and upset was just so heartbreaking, and that's why people became even more motivated to want to find her.
We are outside Gabby's boyfriend's house where we have been for days, and he is still not coming out, and he is still not talking to police, even despite this new body cam video.
Once the Moab police in Utah released that body cam incident, the public outrage in this case grew even more intense. It really struck a chord with other victims of domestic violence. So much so that several of them got in vehicles and drove hundreds and hundreds of miles to just be on the Laundrie's front lawn and put a face to domestic violence.
Dirty laundry! This house should be burned!
Things started to really get crazy outside the Laundrie's house. People from all over the country started either bringing or having flowers delivered to the Laundrie's house. So every day, all day, florists would be delivering flowers on behalf of Gabby. And they were just one after another, flowers, flowers, flowers. I remember talking to Joe Vitito about the video, and you can imagine, I mean, if it was heartbreaking for us covering it, for them to see it, it was really, really troubling. We were all waiting to see how Moab police would respond, how they would explain what happened with the traffic stop. It was 5 months later that they finally released a statement. And the statement said, the independent agency's investigative report finds that the officers who responded to the incident made several unintentional mistakes that stemmed from the fact the officers failed to cite Miss Petito for domestic violence. So even if they just thought that Brian was the victim, if they had arrested Gabby in that moment, that could have changed everything.
I'm sorry, I really thought it was Gabby.
Yeah.
The domestic dispute between Brian and Gabby, it certainly struck a chord with the investigative team at that point in time. It had already been to the level of physical altercation in Utah. And in my experience as an investigator, domestic offenders, it doesn't just necessarily stop. If anything, it will escalate, and that was concerning to us.
Shortly after the traffic stop, Brian's father pays to have Brian flown back to Florida for about 6 days while Gabby stays behind in Utah.
We still to this day don't know what the point of that trip was and can only speculate that they needed a break after this domestic violence. And Brian went home and let this settle down for a little while.
The period of time that Gabby spends in Utah without Brian is significant because she is, for the first time in a very long time, alone and able to think without Brian picking fights or getting in her face. This might have been a period of time where she began to think seriously about ending the relationship with Brian.
We obtained a lot of cellular data for that time period when Brian traveled to Florida, where Gabby had contacts with old friends, and there's been a theory that maybe Brian caught wind that she was talking to old friends, some of them male, and that could have spun him up or agitated him.
During the time Brian is gone in Florida, Gabby uploads her magnum opus, their first van life video.
Gabby Petito never goes outside.
What's immediately interesting to me about this video is that it includes a lot of footage from road trip number 1. They look genuinely happy because they are. And I can't help but wonder, maybe it also helped her realize that everything that was good about their relationship was in the past. So why didn't Gabby just leave Brian during this 6-day period of time?
The answer is, sadly, a story that's been written over and over and over again by domestic violence victims. And sadly, these victims truly love their abusers. And they don't want the relationship to end. According to witnesses and the evidence that's gathered in the investigation, on August the 23rd, 2021, Brian returns from his 6-day trip in Florida back to rejoin Gabby in Utah. And they check out of their Salt Lake City hotel. And at this point, it looks like they're headed for Wyoming.
Scholars say that the most dangerous part of an abusive relationship is when a victim decides to leave. And given how quickly things escalated next, I think that Gabby decided she was going to leave Brian.
The worst thing that could happen was her saying, enough, I've had enough, because his biggest fear was Gabby leaving him.
After setting up camp at the Grand Teton National Forest, Brian and Gabby drive about an hour to a Tex-Mex restaurant in Jackson, and they have lunch. They happen to be seated near a couple that witnesses everything that happens next.
I could tell that the waitress and they were having like some type of heated discussion. By like the second or third time the waitress returned to the table, they like stood up from their seats and abruptly like walked out. We were kind of like, that was weird. And then Brian Laundrie comes back in. And that's why it was kind of a scene, because it was like, oh my God, this guy who was just creeping us out, he just walks back in.
I just have like a vivid memory of looking over there at that hostess stand, and he's just like, red-faced, kind of talking to her, and his hands are going everywhere, just like chewing her out about something.
It was just kind of, it was scary. I can still remember the feeling that I got from him to this very day.
According to eyewitness accounts, Brian and Gabby leave without paying or try to convince the restaurant to refund them the money. I can't say for sure what was going on, but why did Brian have this outburst? What was the thing that upset him? And I hope the thing that upset him was that she dumped him.
During the course of the investigation, we found some lines of communication in which either Brian and or Gabby mentioned Gabby leaving him or going away or finding a new boyfriend. It was a strong theory of ours that maybe the relationship was going to a head.
We've got escalation. There was explosive anger and rage by Brian. He's not even worried about people witnessing it.
Shortly after the incident at the restaurant, Gabby and Brian make their way to a nearby grocery store where things get weird.
Jackson Police Department helped us find video of Brian and Gabby at one of the local grocery stores.
It was crystal clear how angry Brian Laundrie was in that moment.
He appeared to slam the door out in the parking lot. So that combined with what had happened at the restaurant, things just were sort of unraveling between Brian and Gabby, it seems.
You can see camera footage of them actually entering the store and then walking around the store. They don't make a purchase.
You can see they're not really shopping. And finally, I see what appears to be her putting something in her bag and them leaving, and they never go to a cash register to pay. My take, that may never be proven, but it seemed to me that Brian Laundrie was asking Gabby Petito to shoplift.
Brian had claimed that he and Gabby had no money. It's not true. Brian had about $20,000 in his checking account.
all of these little pieces we see with Moab, with the situation at the Tex-Mex restaurant, with the situation that occurred in the grocery store, we see a clear picture of how completely broken their relationship was by this point.
And if Brian Laundrie turns out to know more than he's saying right now, he might have to actually face charges in each of those jurisdictions, which means extradition and a domino effect of legal problems all over the country.
There were a lot of twists and turns in this case. There was a lot of outrage, frustration, but the tie that bound all of these narratives together was the fact that Gabby was still missing, and a family was still desperate to find her.
Do you think something bad has happened to her? I believe she's going to come home.
Gabby's parents kept making sure that their daughter was in the news, that people were still making efforts to find their daughter.
We don't have Gabby. We haven't lost focus to that, and that's something we're still spearheading. We got to get her home safe. I'm about to break down.
The entire situation must have been a nightmare for her family, not knowing where she was. Then social media jumped in and wanted to get answers for Gabby's family.
Her captions were a lot deeper, detailing her travels, tagging the location, and this photo didn't do it.
There were theories about, Gabby having taken off on her own, or Gabby having gotten into an accident.
Social media was kind of exploding during this whole time period.
Okay, so the only update that I have right now is
So the two actually lived with Brian's parents, and Brian is going over and over and over.
Now look at the trail she has saved. I screenshotted it, so here we go. Grand Teton Park, Grand Teton Park.
You had a lot of these social media sleuths who were digging through Gabby and Brian's social media, trying to find witnesses, trying to find people who may have seen them while they were on their road trip.
There's all this new information about Brian renting a storage unit and leaving Gabby in Utah.
We followed up on every single tip, probably 300 to 400 tips per day, and the analysts did an outstanding job vetting out each and every lead that came in so we could determine whether we needed to act on it and provide that feedback to the team on the ground up in Wyoming. At that point in the investigation, we're thinking foul play, and hopefully we're wrong, but because of where this occurred in rural Wyoming during that time of year, if there is a person out there lost, or a body out there, we got to find it right away.
News Nation correspondent Brian Entin is live for us tonight in Northport, Florida. Brian, is Brian Laundrie in that home behind you tonight?
Well, Marnie, just within the last 2 minutes, this story has taken a very, very strange and dramatic turn. Apparently, we have just learned police do not know where Brian Laundrie is right now. Suddenly, Brian Laundrie was missing, where it was like, oh my gosh, this story has gotten even crazier.
This was like gasoline being thrown on an inferno. The story was already blanketing the headlines.
Tonight, all eyes are on one house in a Florida neighborhood.
And suddenly, it goes nuclear. Brian Laundrie is missing? How did that happen? I mean, we all thought he was inside the house.
This is his house behind me.
Brooke, what are you thinking? Helping your son.
We've been watching the house for days. Tonight, the police showed up at the house. The FBI showed up at the house. They went inside the house. They came back out. They got evidence bags. They went back in. The weirdest thing about him missing was we were all out there, and there were FBI agents outside the house in unmarked cars. There were cameras in the trees. It didn't make any sense.
Brian Laundrie was able to come out the front door, get into the Mustang in the front driveway, pull out of the driveway, and drive off. All unnoticed. The Northport police, who were supposed to be watching the house, somehow believed that it was Roberta Laundrie Now, I don't know how you mix those two people up.
There was a lot of frustration from people all over the world thinking like, gosh, did they drop the ball? Like, how did Brian Laundrie just drive away?
Brian was missing, and the shockwaves that sent through all of us who are following this investigation were massive.
Brian is nowhere to be located. They do not know where he is. The police did not announce an exact time frame, but the last time that they saw him was on Tuesday.
It was like, how could he be missing? He's the one that has answers about Gabby and what happened, and he's gone.
When I first learned that Brian's parents had reported him missing, I felt like he had escaped the country. That's what the theory, maybe he's on the run and this is bigger.
Initially, there was no specific location given of where Brian was, so people all over the country were looking for him. I was getting like direct messages in my Twitter, like every day, all day, of people who thought that they had seen Brian Laundrie. How confident are you, that seeing pictures of Brian Laundrie, that it was definitely him?
He had that black beard and black mustache. I'm just 100% confident.
The rumors on social media were going crazy. Brian Laundrie lookalikes were literally like being chased through mountainsides and parking lots.
A bunch of people kept coming up to me and asking if I was Brian Laundrie. Some were very serious.
Gabby's parents want answers!
They deserve answers!
Outside the Laundrie's house became even more of like a circus-like atmosphere. You had a lot of people showing up very upset. People started calling the Laundries the dirty Laundries. They would bring laundry baskets and put them out on the lawn to sort of like, represent the dirty Laundries.
Brian is missing, which is shocking, but don't forget, Gabby is still missing too. So while police in Northport, Florida try to figure out what happened to Brian Laundrie, 2,000 miles away in Wyoming, hundreds of law enforcement officers start a massive ground search for Gabby Petito.
We initiated that physical search for Gabby in the Spread Creek dispersion area on September 18th, 2021. This area in Wyoming is extremely rural. You have grizzly bears in the area, you had wolves in the area. This was steep terrain, rocks, boulders, creeks. This was a task that is not for most people. So day one, we searched the entire south side of the Spread Creek dispersion area. There was a pair of underwear recovered. There were cigarette butts. There was a hammock recovered. We didn't know whether they were evidence or not. We thought, is it just some hiker dropped it, or is Gabby out there?
Gabby's parents at this point are desperate. They have not heard from their 22-year-old daughter in weeks. And what they don't know is that the police now have a clue that's going to narrow the search.
Here it is on the left.
And it is a major break in the case.
As we were still searching for Gabby there in Wyoming, law enforcement was also searching for Brian Laundrie.
He was reported missing from the parents, and they said he had gone on a hike at the Carlton Reserve. Law enforcement searched the park full throttle with all resources.
The Carlton Reserve, which is about 15 minutes from the Laundrie's house, it's this big wildlife reserve, a swamp, alligators, mosquitoes.
The Carlton Reserve is massive, like the size of Manhattan. It's one thing to go for a walk. It's another thing to try to find a missing person in there. It's like a needle in a haystack.
Law enforcement also knew that he took a gun. There was one gun missing from Chris Laundrie's gun collection, and that was a revolver. So all of this was known.
It's quite strange because Brian allegedly drove to the Carlton Reserve, but his car is not in the parking lot. So what people later find out is his parents go get his car and they drive it home. Like, what? So it's all very, very weird.
Which leads me to the question, what do Mr. and Mrs. Laundrie know about where their son was and where he is now?
At this point, the Laundries have to know something. It's impossible they don't know something.
Social media certainly pays off. There's pros and cons to it, but it was essential in the search for Gabby in Wyoming. One of the key tips that we received and located was from the Bethunes. This is a couple who were internet entrepreneurs and had allegedly been in that area and believed that they had captured video of Gabby and Brian's van.
On August 27th, 2021, we got camera footage going through the Grand Tetons Park.
The Bethunes had a dash cam that was constantly rolling. So they thought, let's go back and look through all of our raw video from the dash cam on this one dirt road, pretty much in the middle of nowhere.
Here it is on the left.
Gabby Petito's van is right there on the side of the road. So they put the video on social media.
And I slowed it down so you can possibly see it a little bit better.
When they were editing the footage, they couldn't believe what they saw.
They actually saw the van.
They had done an excellent job of capturing that video. So that compiled with the video of Brian and Gabby that was obtained at the grocery store, we could prove without a doubt that this is them, that were in the area on August 27th of 2021.
The Bethunes video, that really cracked the case open.
We took that tip and we were able to do some overlay of mapping technology to determine exactly where that van was parked. So we scheduled the day 2 search, which was just north of where that van was located. That morning on September 19th, I don't know why we felt like that was the day that we were going to find Gabby. We focused on the north side of the Spread Creek dispersion area, and we had horseback team of searchers actually walking through the creek because they could get a better viewpoint. They saw what they believed to be a human under a blanket near a makeshift campsite. It was likely to be Gabby. I immediately got in my car and headed to Jackson and found a private room to talk with her stepdad, Jim Schmidt, who was in Jackson, Wyoming at the time, waiting for any and possible news that we could provide him. I had pictures of clothing and some personal identifying marks, tattoos from the person that was recovered. And Jim was able to validate that that was Gabby Petito. There was an aspect of Dad delivering news to Dad that made this a little more difficult than usual.
First and foremost, I would like to extend sincere and heartfelt condolences to Gabby's family. Earlier today, human remains were discovered, consistent with the description of Gabrielle Gabby Petito.
At the end of that day, I went back and I called my own family. I called my 2 boys that were about the same age at that time, and then I went on a long run.
We will never know how Joe Petito processed that news personally. Publicly, he put out a social media post with angel wings that clearly showed that he knew she was with the angels.
I got a message from some news station that said that they had found a body. And I remember I felt pain I'd never felt before. And I don't know, I ended up on the floor somehow. And I was just screaming and yelling and mad. I was so mad. And it took me time to then be grateful because they found her. And my biggest fear was never finding her.
On the day that her body was found, it really stoked my hatred for Brian Laundrie. He left that hand, that ring, that person in the wilderness for animals to eat.
My podcast co-host and I immediately got on the phone because we just couldn't stop crying and we just didn't have any words.
When Gabby's body was found, what was determined from her autopsy was that she was strangled. It's how most men kill women, and it's the ultimate power and control move, and it silences the victim forever.
Nobody will ever know exactly what happened during this trip to Wyoming. The investigation revealed that her laptop was last used on August 27th. It basically timed out around 11:30 p.m.
I think he decided that if she wasn't going to be with him, that she didn't get to exist, and he strangled her to death. She died in pain, and she died afraid.
If this were anything like an accident, the first thing that you would do is call for help and assistance, but that's not what he chose to do.
One of the first things that Brian Laundrie does is call his parents, and his parents immediately retained a lawyer.
He intended to kill her. He intended to control her. He intended to silence her. He was a clear actor in that, and what's more, he tried to cover it up.
On the evening of the 27th, Brian departs the Spread Creek area. Brian's phone begins to ping in another area of the park on a different tower. Gabby's phone did not leave the van. And then Brian's phone was actually turned off for about a 12-hour period.
Brian wandered around trying to create an alibi for himself. He was trying to create evidence that he and Gabby had basically had some kind of argument and that he had gone off hiking on his own. He hiked 27 miles.
Brian traveled towards Coulter Bay. We were able to use cellular data to corroborate that. When he arrives, he actually makes himself known to park rangers and employees that he was engaged to Gabby Petito. From Coulter Bay, he hitchhiked back to the van.
The next time Brian was seen in public, it's by Miranda Baker. And Miranda created a TikTok post about her encounter with Brian once she figured out who Brian was. And that really helped the investigators to piece together Brian's movements after Gabby was killed.
We picked him up at Coulter Bay at 5:30. He approached us asking us for a ride because he needed to go to Jackson, which we were going to Jackson that night. He hopped in the back of my Jeep. He then told us he's been camping for multiple days without his fiancée.
The logical reason for Brian to even return to the scene would be to get the van so that he could go home.
Brian hops in Gabby's van and starts driving back to Florida without Gabby, using her phone and his phone to send text messages back and forth to try and solidify this alibi.
In the pretend conversation between himself and Gabby, she became the aggressor. Brian's side of the texting was, I love you, I want you back in my life, I want things to work out. Gabby's side was, you're a jerk, I want you to die. We weren't buying it. We also learned that Gabby's account had a $1,000 transfer from her account into Brian's account, and were able to determine that that transaction occurred when she couldn't have possibly been alive, thus making it a crime for Brian to have transferred that money without her authority. What that did for us is allow us to get warrants and use additional tools and techniques to be able to locate and hopefully apprehend Brian.
The hunt for Brian Laundrie isn't slowing down. Crews went back out to the Carlton Reserve Wednesday, an area 75% underwater. Northport Police and other law enforcement agencies are now using boats, dive teams, and sonar equipment to move this search forward.
Law enforcement searched the Carlton Reserve for weeks, spending literally millions of dollars.
We went up in the helicopter just to get an idea of what the search looked like from the air, because a lot of it was on airboats and horseback, things that we couldn't really see from the roadway. When you look around from up here at the helicopter, you can tell just how massive it is. Brian Laundrie could be anywhere out here, if he even is out here.
People wanted him to be found so that he would have to pay for what he did.
Brian's own sister, Cassie, went on Good Morning America on October 5th and begged for her brother to come clean.
No, I do not know where Brian is. I'd turn him in. I don't know if my parents are involved. I think if they are, then they should come clean.
After about 5 weeks, law enforcement had to say, it's time we move on. They ended up opening up the park for the public to use again for the first time in weeks. The next day, Chris and Roberta Laundrie were accompanied by a federal agent and a local officer as they walked the Carlton Reserve to look for themselves.
Chris and Roberta know their son, and they know the places that he liked to go out there, and they'd been out there with him before.
It was about, as I recall, around a 45-minute hike into the Carlton Reserve, and there it was, the remnants of Brian Laundrie.
On October 20th, it becomes official when investigators in Florida announced that they have found the remains of Brian Laundrie in the Carlton Reserve.
Earlier today, investigators found what appears to be human remains, along with personal items belonging to Brian Laundrie.
I was really invested in Brian's capture. He represented an opportunity for catharsis and revenge. Finally, we were going to see him brought to trial. But that never happened because he had gotten away with it.
He never had to admit to it. He never had to face Gabby's parents and, look them in the eye after taking their daughter's life. And, I think a lot of people on social media felt that frustration, especially for Gabby's family.
If your son is a person of interest in your future daughter-in-law's disappearance and you see them with a hiking backpack and you think they may be heading into the woods, I don't know, isn't it just kind of maybe a good idea to be like, hey, what are you doing?
The internet would later sort of credit itself with contributing in a positive way to Gabby's case. I actually feel the opposite. I think that the internet robbed her family of justice because when commenters started flooding his social media feeds, demanding, that he turn himself in and stuff, that it started to dawn on him that maybe it wasn't going to be so easy.
Brian Laundrie died by suicide, specifically a gunshot wound to the head, and there are still so many more questions about this case.
I can only assume that her family felt very robbed by his suicide.
There are things about this case and story that have never made much sense or that are just very strange, and this is one of those parts. The Laundries went out in the morning and stumble upon Brian Laundrie's remains.
Every investigative bone in my body tells me that they knew their son had committed suicide.
Alongside Brian's remains in the Carlton Reserve, they find a backpack, they find a notebook, and they find a gun. And contained in that notebook is a confession.
This was what he wrote in his account. Rushing back to our car, trying to cross the stream of Spread Creek before it got too dark to see. Too cold. I hear a splash and a scream. I could barely see. I couldn't find her for a moment, shouted her name. I found her breathing heavily, gasping, and she was freezing cold. And then he says, I don't know the extent of Gabby's injuries, only that she was in extreme pain. I ended her life. I thought it was merciful, that it is what she wanted. And if this were this, merciful killing, which is a fantastical thing to say, why would you leave your loved one there? And he lied and he lied again.
Ultimately, the confession that Brian wrote out is just a rambling pile of garbage. He won't admit to murdering her. He's only admitting to a mercy killing. What a prince.
Brian Laundrie's confession letter was released online.
The whole story is likely fabricated.
People are calling BS on this confession altogether.
I think it frustrated everybody online who wanted justice for her because he really didn't tell the truth. He didn't confess.
He continues, I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked, I was in shock, but from the moment I decided, took away her pain, I knew I couldn't go on without her. Gabby, we lost our future. I can't live without you. But a lot of Brian's behaviours, they're characteristics of psychopathy. The fact that he took no responsibility for his own behaviour, the fact that he lied so many times on the police stop. He showed no remorse, never saw any remorse or empathy towards Gabby. He strangled her. That was his ultimate way of controlling her.
Some really explosive allegations about who knew what and when.
For the first time, the Petitos came face to face with the Laundries.
Christopher Laundrie Brian disclosed to him that Gabby was gone and that he needed a lawyer.
The Petitos decided, absent justice that could be meted out against Brian, they would file a lawsuit against his parents, the Laundries.
There are still many questions that the Petito family has about what the Laundrie family knew.
In 2022, the Petito family filed a civil lawsuit against Chris and Roberta Laundrie for emotional distress. They claim that the Laundries hid the fact that Brian had killed their daughter.
This lawsuit from Gabby's parents, they claim that the Laundries knew that Brian killed Gabby, and they are seeking damages for intentional infliction and emotional distress.
For the first time since their daughter had disappeared, the Petitos came face to face with the Laundries. To be a fly on the wall at that deposition, I'll bet you could have heard a pin drop.
And then this bombshell. It comes out in the deposition that Brian Laundrie called his parents almost 2 weeks before Gabby Petito was reported missing that she's gone. And he reportedly called his family 20 times. I think everybody was just shocked to hear this. Joining us now to lay it all out is Patrick Riley. He is the attorney for the Petito family.
Well, good evening, Brian. During that deposition, for the first time, Christopher Laundrie disclosed that on August 29th of 2021, he received what he called a frantic telephone call from Brian, in which Brian disclosed to him that Gabby was gone and that he needed a lawyer. So that just confirmed what we had suspected going back almost 2 years.
You get a call from your son August 29th saying Gabby's gone and I need a lawyer? And they keep this quiet for weeks and weeks? It's really beyond the pale.
Petitos have told me directly that they do not want to settle. They want to go to trial with the Laundries. They feel like this is their sort of one shot at justice for their daughter.
I call murders like Gabby's a murder in slow motion because it happens over time. There were 1,000 things that went on prior to Brian's strangling Gabby and killing her. 1,000 cuts, as we say. It's the murder psychologically of the spirit and the soul too, not just physically.
The fact that it didn't fit that stereotypical portrait of abuse made it harder to recognize it for what it was.
Be honest. Grab my face, like this.
I think it's on us as a society for not framing certain elements of coercive control as violence, whether or not it ends in bloodshed.
I think what's so tragic about Gabby's story is that, sure, it's a cautionary tale if we know all the signs. But not everyone knew all the signs. And I think Gabby Petito said a lot about her life and was very open and was willing to share, but was not willing to share that part.
The Gabby Petito story changed my life and my career. We started a missing series at News Nation where we highlight missing people every week. I've become passionate about domestic violence awareness and covering those stories also.
Gabby's dad, Joseph Petito, he's really working hard to make sure that Gabby's legacy lives on. The Gabby Petito Foundation has not only done a lot to help victims of domestic violence, but have also helped so many missing persons. And there wasn't justice, but Gabby's legacy can live on.
Every day, there's something that reminds me about her. Butterflies make me think about Gabby a lot. But I want Gabby to be remembered for who she was. That person that just radiates light, that loved nature and loved to be adventurous. I want people to know there are people in her life that miss her every day.